runs more before 9 a.m. than most people do all year. Doug Pagitt, broadcasting audio and video around the world and maybe even on the space station, but right now, live from the Twin Cities.
All right, we're giving a call to Mike Stavlund. Mike Stavlund, the the author of A Force of Will, a fantastic book, and we're going to be giving away a copy of A Force of Will during our conversation. Mike Stavlund, fantastic author of the book Force of Will. Thanks for being on the show.
It's my pleasure, Doug.
Oh, this is an honor, buddy. This has been a long time coming.
The honor's mine. I've been looking forward. This is a life goal of mine. I think maybe I wrote the book just so I could have this opportunity, but I wasn't prepared to follow your previous guest.
Well, none of us were prepared for that, Mike.
Oh my goodness!
Are you slightly cringing? Are you? Are you recoiled?
I'm cringing on many levels. I may or may not be considering such a procedure myself. And so I've got all kinds of levels of cringiness, but that was, I've never heard John quite like that. And
well, for those who didn't hear the previous segment, it's worth giving a listen to if you would like to hear about the vasectomy of John Patrick. But for these purposes, A Force of Will has been released upon the world. And it's a terrific book, reshaping of faith in a year of grief. And Mike, congratulations. It's a fantastic book.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to have read it and happy to talk about it today.
For the for the listeners who haven't had a chance to behold the glory of the book yet, tell us where it came from and what you're doing with it, because not a lot of people are familiar with the genre of grief and personal memoir and spiritual encouragement, sort of all at the same time.
Yeah, thanks. I wrote it starting in 2006, shortly after my wife and I had twins, and my wife had twins, and I was there, and our son had some really significant heart conditions right away, and had major heart surgery at 3 days of life, and it was a very emotional time, obviously, and very involved. We were at the hospital a lot, and the short version of a long story is that he died 4 months later, and I wanted to try to write about that experience of grief, partly because I'm a book person. I like to read books, and so when something happens to me, I start trying to order books to help me through it, and the books I was finding and the books people were giving me were far from helpful. I found that most of them had a kind of they were trying to pacify the loss that I felt and trying to kind of make me feel better, and they all had this irritating happy ending at the end, where somehow everything kind of got better at the end and things were looking up. So I wanted to write about what I saw as a more tumultuous kind of grief, more non-chronological. I think a lot of the literature about grief suggests that there are these stages you're going to go through, or at least people's popular understanding is you're going to kind of walk your way up this ladder until you're free. And that wasn't my experience. My experience was very tumultuous and nonlinear and non-chronological, and I wanted to write a kind of messy account of that kind of thing. And like you said, the hope in this kind of memoir being that other people can identify with it, and my hope is that it'll resonate for other folks as well, for other kinds of loss. Like, I hope this isn't just a book about infant loss or even about death or grief in that way, but that it can help other people with other kinds of disappointments and challenges and losses that we all face.
And you have really done I think a terrific job in the book of bringing people into your experience for you and Stacy of the loss of Will and of the whole process of what that means to be a parent that has to deal with the body of their child at the funeral home, what they have to deal with in their own life and their relationships. Like, you really, you didn't dodge. Maybe you feel like you did, but it doesn't feel to the reader that you dodged a lot of topics. Like, you went right at them pretty significantly.
Yeah, I mean, I literally wrote it during that year. My understanding was that there is a kind of something unique about that first year of grief. And I've read other folks talk about, even in some Jewish practices, where that's a year that's really marked out in terms of the proper, sort of the way that you work through that. So I just wanted to write. So literally, I was just every week I'd sit down and write about the thing that was right in front of me. And lots of the times, those were memories of kind of processing. Yeah, like you said, I tried to be honest about it. I tried to be blunt about things, like, the way in which you try to, your life's altogether different, right? When you've held your dead baby's body, your arms are never the same, and that year was filled for me with a lot of flashbacks of things that had happened, and worries and regrets and wonderings if I could have done something different, or if we'd done something wrong. So that's what it was like, and so that's what I wanted to write about.
There's this little section that I think sort of grabs at one of the dilemmas that you're sharing about here. It's in the chapter called Leg Cramps. And you write, a few days after Will died, I realized the actual story of his last few hours was at once unforgettable and yet a subject to the shifting sands of memory.
Yeah.
It was surprising to realize that something so life-altering and iconic was nevertheless suffering from fuzzy details, missing elements, and subtle reinterpretations. Somehow, the questions I was asking about it in the rawness of my shock and grief were changing the story. So I forced myself to sit down and to write it out. So in some ways, we're brought into your own process of going through grief and how you're being reshaped in this process. Not so much you talking to the reader only about, hey, here's some ways for you to make it through your grief.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, this is just a memoir in the sense that it's not doing this sort of second order reflection on grief, or it's not really a guide to how to do it. I'm not. I mean, I'm not a grief counselor. I have some friends who are, and I've had folks who are grief counselors, endorse and recommend the book. So I think it's got some value in those kind of fields, but it's not intended to be, and it surely isn't a kind of like a how-to guide to grief. There's probably some cautionary tale in there about what to say and what not to say to folks who are going through that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was interesting that you think these memories that you have are going to be so solid,
right.
But even in the talking about them, you find details kind of shifting, and so I kind of wanted to force myself to remember just what happened. A lot of people were asking, and so I wanted to. At the time, it was kind of a way for me to get it all out there and clarify it for myself.
Now, I know that you're not one who wants to tell other people how they should think or act in these areas, but
well, I am now.
Good.
I mean, that is to say, I finished the book in 2007, and I went through a real good editorial process with my editors in terms of improving it and sharpening it. But I really didn't change anything, much of anything that I wrote. It still exists as a document about that year, but that was years ago, right? That was a few years ago, and since then, I've done a lot of this sort of second order reflection about my thoughts about grief and maybe what my experience can say in a more kind of general way. So
tell us a bit about that. Give us a quick little punch list. Like what in that year of grief, and then in your reflecting on this. I was just at a funeral yesterday, and I walked up, and in this case, it was done. The funeral was, in my view, in the right order. In other words, a child was burying their parent, which is the way it's going to be for most of us, and is the way it ought to be. It seems to me, instead of parents burying their child. But even walking up right at the funeral, and I know that's sort of the falseness of a public event around someone's grief, so it's always a little awkward. But I didn't know what to say all the time, right? So and everyone feels that sort of uncomfortable moment when you're going to go to someone who maybe well but not intimately. And you don't know what to say. So give us a quick little Mike Stavlund punch list on things that of how one could deal with someone else in the midst of their grief.
Well, I think I should start by saying I don't know what to say in those situations either. I've done a lot of writing about this and thinking about this, but I think there's something powerful about the not knowing what to say, and I think it's okay to not know what to say, or to say something. I think obviously saying less is probably better than saying more. A lot of times I think we, whether it's some, a Facebook friend we have or a funeral that we're at, we tend to say too much because we're nervous and anxious. I think as a person who dealt a lot with grief, I think I understood what people were doing was trying to make themselves feel a little bit better. They were uncomfortable, and they were worried about. A lot of times, we're worried about the same thing happening to us or something similar like that. And so we tend to pile up a lot of words that we really don't need. So I would say saying less is better. I think saying something like "I'm sorry" or "I'm sorry for your loss" is a pretty simple thing to say. I think offering to help in whatever way you can.
Yeah.
Maybe that doesn't even happen with words, but there's a sense in which we can stand next to somebody who's going through that, and we can be a help to them. That's it. That really is friendship, though, right?
Yeah. But
Because
like it seems like for a lot of people, they feel this pressure to be Christian or to be religiously engaged, and so people want to, I think there's this impulse to not want to leave someone just in their sorrow at a funeral, right? So you wouldn't just say, I'm really, really sorry, this is horrible. People want to step that next, they want to take that next step, right? There's this impulse that people have to want to say, but, you want to add a big but to the thing.
That's a wonderful impulse, and I think we just need to be monitoring that. We need to be aware of that, the way in which that impulse can be negative, right? So it's great to bring somebody meals and do their laundry and stuff like that. But I've talked to some people who said, people try to do that for me, and that's my kind of role. The way I want to work through things is I want to be in a helper role. And so when they took that laundry and food preparation away from me, I lost something, and I needed to send them away and say, no, stop trying to help me.
Oh, interesting.
And I think, one thing on my punch list is to really step back and let them go through the sorrow. Like, this is a hard thing. Your friend is going to be dealing with a lot of heavy stuff, and letting them do that is important. And I think I encourage people to take more of a listening posture. I think there's an impulse that we have too, that try to help somebody with our good answers or our good theology or our good support or our good friendship. And a little bit of that may be driven by fear, when the reality is, hey, this is something they're going to have to do alone, and we're going to have to let them be alone in it.